I wonder whether the increased access and use of hormonal birth control influencing how objective the metrics are that women look for in men with regards to education, employment, future prospects, and stuff like that, is worsening this hypergamous nature at the moment, and also meaning that apps like Tinder and Hinge, which are very easy to put on what your job title is, what your education level is, so on and so forth. I wonder whether this is creating a hormonal profile in women which further predisposes them to choosing these types of objective metrics.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think that that's a fascinating possibility. I mean, and how could it not? I mean, it's like we already see the way that that hormonal birth control. I mean, we see how it's affecting women's achievement. You know, since the pill was made legally available to women, the number of legally available to single women, which was in the early 1970s, late 1960s, what you see is that the number of women who started doing things like applying to graduate programs, to law school, to medical school, to business school, it went up by like 1,000%. And it was just because women now could be sure that if they started that program, they could finish. Right?
And the employers as well, presumably, would be more certain as well.
Yeah, and so it's just like it just like gave women the ability to plan. I mean, it's used to be for like people like my grandmother, it was like the idea of going to graduate school would just be stupid because unless she was like totally chaste.
Celibate, yeah.
Yeah, the entire time that she was doing it, she was probably going to have to give it up because she was pregnant at some point. And so for, my generation and younger generations and women who came before me who've also had access to this, like, what a tremendous thing it's done for us in terms of allowing us to make plans and achieve. But because of that, you do have this like little bit of a mating crisis. And I have another little nugget for you to like chew on. And while you're thinking about this with the pill and the mating crisis, and this was something that was actually brought. Do you know who Dave Asprey is?
Yeah, the like health guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did his podcast, and he's like a really smart guy. And we were talking about my book, and we were talking about the pill, and this was his idea. And I think that he's like totally onto something because it's really brilliant, really interesting. But, part of the mating crisis, part of it is that women are achieving so much, right? So like that's part of it. But the other part of it is that men are just like totally floundering. I mean, just circling the drain. And so, there is some research indicating that men's testosterone, we are not red deer, right? Like our species are not red deer, but men's testosterone levels do seem to be sensitive to the presence of like fertile women, right? So men, there's been studies where they have men, having piped in the scent of ovulating women or women during the luteal phase, and you see that testosterone levels seem to be sensitive to cues of female fertility. And so what Dave had suggested, and I thought was so interesting, was we have so many women on hormonal birth control, so much ovulation being suppressed, meaning that there are so few cues to estrogen, like sort of in the air, that could it be that men's lack of achievement motivation is in part driven by the fact that their testosterone is in the toilet because of the lack of sort of ovulating women to inspire those higher levels of T. And as you know, testosterone levels are at a ridiculous low.
1% per year it's declined by since 1980.
I mean, think about that. And yes, xenoestrogens, and yes, obesity. I mean, there's a lot of
microplastics and phthalates and more time inside and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, all of that. But even, no matter what they control for, there's still some like factor X out there that's contributing to these low levels of testosterone. So I'm going to throw out there as a possibility the idea that maybe it is a lack of estrogen cues.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, roll it forward even more and think about the fact that women who are on birth control that then urinate into the toilet, which then gets into the water supply, which then increases the amount of estrogen that's supposed to be consumed by men. No idea if there's any truth behind that at all. Yeah. But if it's the case that taking the pill, women who take the pill are sociosexually / pheromonally influencing men's testosterone in terms of the fertility cues, and also biologically, hormonally, internally influencing men's testosterone. Like, roll on top of that poor sleep and higher levels of neuroticism, people spending time in the house, all that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, that's going to drive testosterone down. Now, the fascinating thing is that women who take hormonal birth control are priming themselves for the kind of men that have lower testosterone. So it's both the cause, it's like the demand and the supply of the market for this up until the point at which they come off it.
Right. Yeah. And it's like they want the provisioning, right? Like want a guy who's going to be a provider, but that's also something that's driven by testosterone. We know that men's testosterone levels are associated with like mating success and all of that on the one hand, but it's also associated with achievement. Men who are CEOs and presidents and, in high status roles, that's testosterone too. And so it's like, in some ways, like we're also shooting ourselves in the foot, right? It's like, why aren't there any good men around who are like achieving things and like being successful and maybe there has something to do with what's happening with women's sex hormones. Really fascinating idea.
What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for a selection of the best clips from the podcast over the last few weeks. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace.